Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everybody, I'm Debbie Potts and I'm doing a new episode, audio and video for the Whole Athlete Podcast. And today I have guests on the show, Lisa, Markley, and Jill Grunewald. And we're going to talk about their new book, which I got in the mail, luckily, just in time, the Thyroid Cookbook. And we're going to talk all about it. So welcome, you two. And you guys, by the way, before we get started, can listen on the audio of our podcast version, but go to YouTube, the Whole Athlete Podcast. You can see them, and it's sometimes I think it's more fun to actually see who you're listening to. So mix it up both. So girls, how do you know each other and came out with this book? This is a big, huge project. So let's kind of dive into how this even came about.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Lisa.
Jill and I met in Kansas City. We were both volunteering for a local nonprofit organization that promoted local agriculture and sustainable farming methods. And we just kind of connected over our passion and our love of food, and in particular local food, and just kind of it all blossomed from there.
And your background is RDN and MS in what's your education, Lisa?
Yeah, I have a Master of Science in Nutrition from Bastyr University in Seattle. And then, so RDN stands for Registered Dietitian Nutritionist. So I got credentialed after I finished my master's degree program. I got credentialed as a registered dietitian. And my focus as of late over the last close to a decade now has been focused primarily on the field of culinary nutrition, which is really just translating healthy eating to the plate in, fun, delicious recipes and doing culinary education and cooking classes.
Good. And Jill, talk about you. We've had a few podcasts over the last few years with you, so now everyone can see you too, but tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into thyroid cookbook business.
So my background is actually in architecture. This was going way back. I just turned 48, so back in my 20s and my early 30s. And then I had a design and manufacturing business for a while in Seattle. And then actually it was when I was at the architecture firm. I was just tired, crashing in the afternoon, not being able to focus, putting on a little bit of weight. Even though I was going to the gym, just something wasn't right. And a friend of mine said, hey, there's somebody in the San Juan Islands that you need to go see. He's an herbalist. And I was really intrigued by the herbalism because I believe in, plants as medicine. But this woman, come to find out, actually knew a lot about nutrition. She gave me a book to read by Dr. Barry Sears about blood sugar balancing. And I was never the same after that. I mean, I turned around really quickly and just started reading nutrition books for the fun of it, which sounds totally geeky, but I was really interested in the topic and people started to see me change and, people were coming to me for advice. And then I wanted a career change. So I had actually toyed with the idea of staying in Seattle and going to Bastyr, but ultimately I went another direction and I graduated in 2006 from nutrition school.
Good. And so do you both you wrote a cookbook about the thyroid. How is your personal experience related to that or working with clients over the years? How did it come about to that we needed a cookbook as this, which again, half of it is cookbook, half of it's so informational to really understand it all. So how did this come about to focus on thyroid? Lisa?
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Sure, yeah. I do have Hashimoto's. I became symptomatic. I think it was 2008 when it kind of started as a lump in my throat and just really a lot of tenderness and discomfort. And I went and had a sonogram, it was a CAT scan done in my throat. And I was told that I had thyroiditis and I had elevated antibodies at that time, but my TSH levels were normal. So it took another 4 or 5 years before a doctor actually put me on any sort of thyroid hormone replacement. over that time, I didn't realize until, a few years into having those symptoms that I was, I had all these red flags, and then I just kind of woke up one day and was hit in the face with some really severe symptoms and had to start making some serious changes. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. And there have been some other layers to my illness. I have Lyme's disease and mycotoxin illness, which make it a little more challenging to treat the Hashimoto's and to kind of know like what came first, the chicken or the egg. Yeah. It's like they all kind of affect the immune system and make it so I have to be hyper conscious of things that might flare my immune response, and just try to do a lot of things that, help with stress management and immune support and reducing inflammation in the body. But yeah, I've had Hashimoto's for, I guess, technically since 2008.
Wow. And then Jill, your background, you've had your own health issues. I know we talked before. To share a little bit about that, and we can dive in the book.
So I was also diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2008. But prior to that, a long history of dysglycemia, like having a difficult time managing my blood sugar. And, once I got educated about how to manage my blood sugar, that's what really turned me around, was that foundational piece of things. But also I was like really, and I guess I still am, but like in my 20s and 30s, I was really driven and I did a lot of stuff. I played hard. I worked hard. I wasn't a partier, but I had a very full life, and I think I just really sort of blew some fuses, and my adrenals weren't optimal. And, we know now, we now know that sometimes adrenal imbalances can be one of the triggers for Hashimoto's, not the trigger, but oftentimes there are adrenal issues that are underlying that Hashimoto's. But once I got into health coaching and educating others about how to manage their Hashimoto's, I started doing this series of online classes called Fire Your Thyroid. I haven't done that in a while, but Lisa participated in 2008, and it was her brilliant idea to create this cookbook. She emailed me one night after the last class and said, when you're ready to translate your nutritional recommendations to the plate, let me know. And it was like, oh, yeah, she would be the perfect person to do this with. So here we are 5 years later. We finally got our book published a couple weeks ago. So
yes, yeah. You want to see the video. So it's called The Essential Thyroid Cookbook, 100 Nourishing Recipes for Thriving Hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. So, as you said, you just mentioned, and we talked about that in my nutritional therapy practitioner program I took, but it's so interrelated with adrenals. So it's like, you both said you don't know chicken or the egg, what's first. But a lot of times, we're talking about athletes and anyone. I think we're so over, like we just all took deep breathing exercises before we began, because we're all rushing, even though we follow this and read this and you guys practice what you preach, but we all need to stop, pause, and reset, because we're go all the day. And we're usually all these type A people writing books, doing podcasts and seminars. So yourself, do you work on improving your health? And when you're working with people, your thyroid, and help your adrenals, doing meditation, and we'll get into next why we need to change what we're eating to affect our thyroid. But can you kind of talk into that, one of you, of what you feel like, how the adrenals and thyroid play together and how the whole body's connected?
Yeah, I'll start. So, at its core, so when we are stressed, whether it's physical, mental, emotional stress, the body is going to produce these stress hormones from the adrenals to help us cope. And the more sort of on we are, the more our sympathetic nervous system is prompted versus which is the fight or flight response, versus the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest response. The more we are in that fight or flight and the more stress hormones we're pumping out, not only does it tax the nervous system, but it can also cause a lot of fatigue. A lot of people feel wired and tired at the same time, like they feel kind of amped up and anxious, but they're also tired. And it can slow thyroid function, and overproduction of those hormones can actually hinder thyroid function. But then you have this negative feedback loop where when the thyroid is under functioning and not making enough thyroid hormone to fuel the body, I mean, our thyroid hormones affect every cell in our body. When we're underproducing those hormones and not getting enough oomph and energy and gusto from our thyroid, then we end up making more adrenal hormones to help us cope. So there's this negative feedback loop that happens, and that's why a lot of doctors in the functional medicine community say you'll never get Hashimoto's under control without addressing your adrenals. And in my practice, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I can't diagnose anyone with anything, but I do know how to read labs, and I always defer to my client's doctor, you know, like, talk to your doctor about this, but here's what I see. Or I'll say, if these were my labs, here's how I would interpret them. And some people haven't had their adrenals tested, but many have. And it's pretty rare that people don't have some level of adrenal dysfunction. People who have Hashimoto's, it's rare that they don't have that they don't need some level of adrenal support.
So, I mean, I think that's a big part. Is that I just hear people, we talked on our other podcast we did a while ago, that every client that I have, let's see, 3 out of 5 people are on thyroid medication. And that's why I love talking to you about this stuff, because I think we need to get more of this information out there that, all right, is it because we have adrenal issues, or is it because you have thyroid issues? Which is it? But how do we get better instead of just taking medication forever? So is that kind of related to why you felt like this book needs to come out, or what's your passion? Lisa, do you want to speak up first?
Sure. Yeah, so we're taking a nutritional approach to supporting and optimizing thyroid health, and we see it as being one piece of the puzzle of the greater picture. You know, there are other lifestyle factors like getting stress under control, getting sleep habits and sleep hygiene, optimized to getting adequate sleep every night so that you can handle the stressors throughout the day. But the cookbook focuses primarily on the nutritional aspects that can support thyroid health. But like I said, it's just one piece of the overall picture. And we're not necessarily saying by following our recommendations in the cookbook that you're going to cure or reverse your Hashimoto's. But it's just one of those things that nutrition is a very, the thyroid is a highly nutrient dependent gland. And nutrition is an overlooked tool to help support thyroid health. And in the book, we go into how various nutrients can do that in terms of producing the thyroid hormone. We need certain minerals like iodine, and then the amino acid tyrosine even to form thyroid hormone. And then we need certain nutrients to make the conversion from our inactive form of thyroid hormone to its more active form. So there's a lot of places that nutrition plays a role, and that's why we kind of got really passionate about wanting to put it all together in a book so that it could make it easy for people to understand, okay, well, why is nutrition important? And then from that, how do I take what I know about nutrition and apply it in the kitchen? What are the good food sources of these nutrients that support thyroid health? And how do I make them taste good and in a way that doesn't take, hours and hours and hours or too much time in the kitchen?
Yeah, I think that, great point you made in the book that was the beginning of it, that it's not another paleo or autoimmune protocol. You were making it as different. How is it different, Jill, from another paleo book? That, because as people always say, thyroid or any autoimmune issues, Hashimoto's, is that you have to do paleo. And how's your book and your recipes in here different than another paleo or autoimmune protocol?
The short story is that some of our recipes contain grains and legumes. That's the short story. And Lisa did an amazing job of writing adaptations for the recipes that could be adapted. So you've probably seen that almost every recipe has not only, they have icons for lots of different things, making them paleo or AIP or vegan, also compatible with elimination.
So on the bottom page, this part. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a guide all of that is explained in detail, the educational component, but also there's a condensed sort of guide to the recipes at the first part of that section of the book, where it's just an at a glance, here's how to use these icons. But, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's back in 2008, and that was before paleo and AIP became really popular. So I didn't know that I was supposed to go grain and legume free. I certainly worked hard on my digestive system and, healing that gut, because we know that 70 to 80% of the immune system is in the gut. Frankly, I just didn't know better. And even if I had known better, I would have been like, I don't know. I don't want my diet to be that restricted. And I think that there's more than one way to do things. And so I was able to get my Hashimoto's under control by focusing on the gut healing, but I was still eating moderate amounts of grains and legumes. So as my coaching practice grew and grew, and I was getting more and more Hashimoto's clients, I didn't ask them to do anything differently than what I had done. And then, there's always some personalization to it. Everyone's bio-individual. So there's always, unique experiences and circumstances. But as time went on, paleo got really popular, and then autoimmune paleo. And I call them refugees. I get a lot of those refugees as clients, people who've done paleo or AIP. And I don't want to say it's not a good approach. And I outline that in detail in the book. I'm not dismissing those approaches. I just don't think it's a one size fits all for everybody. And for a lot of people, especially the people who are like weaning themselves off of the standard American diet, to ask them to go from fast food and soda and, donuts and pizza to an autoimmune paleo diet is a shock for them. And it causes it's a major lifestyle overhaul, and it can be really stressful for people. And we have the science that shows us that any type of stress, physical, mental, or emotional, not only is it going to cause some adrenal imbalances, but we know that stress increases autoantibodies. So you have this person who's so stressed out about going on such a restricted diet that it's kind of like, a 2 steps forward, 2 steps back situation. So I see what we can do without making things so restricted. And frankly, largely based on the research of Dr. Eric Sonnenberg. I'm sorry. What's his first name? I'm sorry. His wife's name is Erica. He wrote The Good Gut. He's the Stanford. Sonnenberg, the last name.
I've heard of him, but
anyway, I quote him in the book, and he's done he and his wife have done some really good research about how properly prepared grains and legumes can actually be beneficial for the microbiome or the digestive environment. So we've had this wave of paleo and AIP, which again, I'm not here to discount it, but we've also got this research that shows us that if they're eaten in moderation and prepared properly, they benefit the microbiome. So a lot of people have asked us, well, what is your thyroid diet, or what is your Hashimoto's diet? What kind of diet are you promoting in this cookbook? And we're like, we're not promoting a diet.
Yeah.
We've tried to meet people where they are and provide adaptations so that many people can benefit from the cookbook.
Love that. Yeah, that's why I think I try to explain in our different episodes that I'm not an advocate of keto diet. I'm interested in talking about it, who that diet, or I hate the word diet, but what eating plan is appropriate for that person. And as a nutritional therapy practitioner, we talk about, the foundations is everyone's bio-individual, as you said, and nutrient-dense whole foods diet is ideal, and what ratio is different for everyone based on, like you're saying, gut health and balancing your blood sugar and adrenals and whatnot. But I like how you said in your book in one chapter that low-carb diet, high-fat, isn't ideal for people with adrenal or thyroid issues. Just talk a little bit about that, Lisa or Jill.
Jill, I'll default to you since you wrote that chapter.
Yeah, so I've never been a fan of low carb, ever. I'm not a fan of high carb. I'm not a fan of carb loading necessarily. And, just to make it clear, I'm not very knowledgeable about nutrition for athletes, but I've worked with a lot of athletes. I've worked with, marathon runners and triathletes and even Ironman athletes. And there's this push-pull that can happen in that community. I mean, if they've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, so some of them will say, well, you know, I've been training for so long and I've been slim and trim for so long, and now I'm putting on some weight and I'm experiencing some fatigue and I'm not enjoying my workouts as much as I used to, and I've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's. But they want to be low carb to keep their weight down. And that's another push-pull scenario, because the body's actually, I mean, low carb can be, it can be detrimental for people who have hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. If you're not getting enough glucose from your carbohydrates, you can have a harder time thermoregulating. People can be, you know, cold and have a harder time getting warm. For people who are prone to hair loss, like me, I have a very long history of pretty severe hair loss. And, you know, hair loss is one of the hallmark symptoms of Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. A lot of people get diagnosed because they're losing so much hair. And it's been shown that a low-carb diet can actually contribute to hair loss. So I'm not anti-keto either. I know that the ketogenic diet can be very beneficial for, like, the cancer community. And it just goes back to that thing that everyone is unique and everyone has different circumstances. And, you know, it's like, what is the person who has a history of cancer and Hashimoto's? What do they do? And I think there's a place where those people can, you know, find some common ground between the ketogenic diet, which is high fat, but also incorporate some healthy carbohydrates. And I understand that if you're getting carbohydrates, then you're not in ketosis, but you can still benefit from those healthy fats. And I've worked with a lot of athletes who I've asked to eat a few more carbohydrates, and they feel better, and they say, I'm performing better again. Like, my performance has actually improved since I started eating a few more carbohydrates.
Yeah. And that's why I find, like, you're all saying the same thing. We are all saying the same thing. It's bio individuals. So everybody's different. That's why I think you need to work with someone as yourselves and myself, that we're not just going to give you the same food plan for everyone, because everyone's going to respond differently. And if there's so many things that are interconnected, as your gut health you're talking about too, and just like the lifestyle habits we talk about in the Holistic Method manual that will hopefully come out soon, that, you know, it's the stress and the sleep and all that, as well as the gut digestion system. So Lisa, let's talk a little bit. You wrote all the recipes, or is that your side and Jill did more the first half of the book, or how do you guys figure out
so
this?
I wrote the recipes with the exception of 3 that we had a few guest contributors. So there's over 100 recipes in the book,
A lot.
and they're all based on whole foods, very nutrient-dense ingredients. Did you have a question, Debbie?
Flourless almond butter chocolate chip cookies sound yummy.
Yes, they're really delicious. The base of those cookies is almond butter. And then you'll see in some of the sweets and treats that we don't use any refined sweeteners. So there's no white sugar, but we do use, we'll sweeten with small amounts of maple syrup or honey, or maybe a granulated natural sweetener like coconut sugar. So, I mean, there still is some sugar in the cookbook, and the body's going to metabolize it similarly to a white sugar, but the flavor profile of some of these natural sweeteners is so much more robust that when I formulated the recipes, I was able to use less and maybe use some pureed fruit like mashed banana in a few of the recipes, so that you're getting the whole food, you're getting the fiber and some of the other phytonutrients in that food to help with the carbohydrate metabolism.
And it is all gluten-free and dairy-free. So you found for sure gluten-free, we obviously, but for thyroid, you need to do that. But dairy-free, you found for thyroid clients to keep out dairy of your recipes?
Well, to start, it's a good idea to try to identify what inflammatory triggers might be a problem for individuals who might be dealing with Hashimoto's. We have a chapter in the book that Jill wrote about gluten and the thyroid, as well as about dairy and the thyroid, and it talks more in detail about that. But the situation with gluten is that being that more than 90% of hypothyroidism in the United States is Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune form of hypothyroidism, the body is producing antibodies against the thyroid tissue and causing that damage to occur, so that the thyroid is then compromised in its ability to produce adequate thyroid hormone. So the goal is to try to do things to reduce the body's production of antibodies. And so in the book, we've talked about things that reduce inflammation and reduce some of that autoimmune response. And one of the things that can do that is eliminating gluten from the diet, because gluten is seen as something similar to the thyroid tissue. There's molecular mimicry that occurs, that the body recognizes gluten as, maybe I'm saying it backwards. When the body has gluten in the diet, it produces more antibodies, and those antibodies can attack the thyroid. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jill, that's in your chapter on gluten and the thyroid.
Yeah, because let's just say the first half of the book is a lot of information. So you're educating people that, well, you might have thyroid, because they might find their symptoms like, oh, that's me. But you're also explaining a lot of nutritionally how to help that. And you talk about in your book about the dairy and the gluten. So Jill, you can jump in and go into that, but kind of maybe add into what Lisa's mentioning to kind of talk a little bit, what is the purpose and your goal of the first half of the book? Because there's so much, it's 2 books in one, so much valuable information.
It is. And Lisa explained it beautifully. I mean, I always tell my clients, and I always say in like interviews like this, or if I'm writing a blog post, that I'm not really black and white about food and nutrition, as was probably demonstrated in my explanation about why it's not another paleo or AIP cookbook. I just don't think you can take a black and white approach to things. Having said that, I do advocate a black and white approach to gluten and Hashimoto's. And now there's more evidence coming out that no matter what type of autoimmunity you have, there's 90 different types, that gluten is not a good thing to consume. It can antagonize the immune system. But Lisa said it beautifully. It's there is this biomolecular mimicry phenomenon where the molecular structure of gluten, oddly, is very similar to the molecular structure of thyroid tissue. So when people who have Hashimoto's eat gluten, it can up the ante on Hashimoto's. When it comes to dairy, I'm less black and white about that, but there's some good evidence out there that 50% of people who have Hashimoto's interpret the casein protein fraction of dairy similarly to gluten. So it's a pretty substantive percentage. It's half of the Hashimoto's population. So I think Lisa and I certainly did the right thing in making this cookbook dairy free. But having said that, it's not that everybody who has Hashimoto's needs to be gluten free, and that's for them to determine with their doctor or their practitioner, or just through a simple elimination where you wipe out all dairy products for 3 weeks, and then you take 1 day of a provocation, and you have a significant amount of dairy on that 1 day, and then you monitor for 2 to 3 days and see how you feel. That's the gold standard for sleuthing out a food sensitivity. It's not the ALCAT blood test. It's your body reacting to having had a 21-day break from a particular food, and then having a 1-day reintroduction or provocation, and then monitoring. So that's what I encourage my clients to do, not only with dairy, but several foods. And that's all outlined in the book too. But to your question or your comment about how it's 2 books in one, when we started out on this journey, first of all, it was Lisa's brilliant idea to create this cookbook. And it was like a big slap on the head, on my forehead for me, because I was like, this doesn't exist. Like there's millions of people with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, but there's not a good cookbook. And what I said to Lisa at that time was, I know that you're going to create killer recipes. Like there's no doubt about that. I had eaten Lisa's food, many times before that. And I knew that the recipes would be stellar, but I said to her, I don't want this to be another cookbook. Like I want people to know that these recipes are thyroid and immune supportive. So at the very beginning of this journey, we spent a tremendous amount of time sleuthing out the most thyroid supportive nutrition and the most immune supportive nutrition, where that overlapped. And then we created a ranking system. We had this really geeked out spreadsheet of those nutrients, and then we created a ranking system for foods high in those nutrients. Wow. Not just mediocre sources of those nutrients, but high sources. And we had all these different, databases that we were researching, and we created our own ranking system. And then so the ingredients had to be, we created this list of ingredients that Lisa ultimately took and created these recipes from, but also each recipe had to have a certain nutrient profile to make it to the cookbook. So people don't have to read the first part. I mean, I hope they do, but yeah. I wanted it to be there. People may not geek out on iodine. They may not geek out on B12, but we wanted people to know that this was really well researched, and we didn't just pull these recipes out of thin air.
No, I think it's a great thing. Personally, I always love, obviously, to learn more and continue learning and to understand if you have thyroid issues, I always want to know more, like, oh, why shouldn't I eat that? And if you want to actually feel better from the inside out, it's how you eat. And to understand why, I think gives people more motivation to eat that way and follow recipes, which, a lot of them are 30 minutes or less, it looks like, to make, which is, I'm the 10-minute cook kind of person, but it is very well laid out. And you have pictures, which I always have to have pictures in a cookbook. My husband's more the chef, but if I cook, I need picture and lots of simple steps. But you guys did an excellent job writing this. And how long did it take you to come up with, you said 5 years to finally get this out, or just from the original thought? How long did it take to put all this information together?
Well, it took from the start of the idea to actually publishing it almost 5 years, but you have to understand that both Jill and we both have full-time jobs and full-time families as well, and we were building this kind of from the ground up, meaning we self-published, or we kind of went a unique route in determining how we were doing this, and we worked directly with the food stylist and the photographer and
beautiful.
Bill went up to where we had the book printed in Minnesota and got to see how the book is put together. So we did everything kind of with almost like a grassroots approach, in a way, where we were learning about how to do all this as we went. And with that, there was a learning curve and some time that it took, but we're very proud of the end result and excited that people can now buy it.
So finish up because we're running out of time already, but the cookbook itself, where should people find, or where are they able to find it?
There's a lot of information on our website, which is www.thyroidcookbook.com. And then if they do /store, or just go to thyroidcookbook.com /store, STORE. There's a wealth of information about us, about the cookbook itself. You can even download a sample of the cookbook that's got a few recipes and a few sample chapters, so you can see our writing style and just kind of our approach to thyroid health.
I love it. It's a lot of work, girls. Good job. You're going to be in Costco soon, signing books and doing food demos. Go ahead, Jill. What was that?
You've written a book. I mean, maybe not a cookbook, but you've written a book. You know how challenging it can be.
It's a lot, but recipes too. I even was trying to do some recipes in my holistic method manual, the workbook part, and I'm okay. I didn't do all exact, but you have to do exact measurements, and you have to do the pictures, and you have a lot of work to do in a recipe cookbook, as well as the information, the research, and all the references you have to put in the first half. So I commend you too for putting this together. Working with another person can be a lot of work coordinating schedules. So good job and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And then individual, if people want coaching, what is your website to get a hold of each of you?
So we're both featured on the Healthful Elements website. So that's my longtime practice. And then, Lisa now has a profile on there. So it's healthfulelements.com. It's HEALTH. A lot of people think I say helpful, like with a P.
Healthful
naturalelements.com.
Good. All right, Lisa. Yeah.
Well, I just had a baby 6 weeks ago, so I'm kind of checked out other than working on cookbook stuff right now.
Yeah, that's a lot. Is that your first child?
No, I have a son and a daughter now. My daughter was born 6 weeks ago.
2 kids. Sheesh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have any children, so I don't know how people do a full-time business and write a book and have a family to take care of. So make sure you do your deep breathing, reset more often so you keep practicing what you preach, right? So thanks, girls, for coming on the show today. And make sure you guys go to YouTube, The Whole Athlete Podcast, to find the video version or the audio versions on iTunes or other podcast audio versions you can find on the Android phone too. So thanks, girls. We'll talk to you soon. We'll have to lots more to dive into this book. There's so much into it. So make sure you guys go get it, because I know everyone's got thyroid issues I know of.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.